By Karl Deeter. Thank you both very much indeed for coming in. We might start off. Karl, you've been looking at this. Families are €4,000 a year better off on social welfare. I presume it's a very small, certain group of families.
Yeah, the actual comparison done in The Independent today is looking at two people unemployed with two children, or if one of them takes a job at minimum wage, which means that their income would reduce back down. I think what's really interesting, though, is they said that basically two people unemployed, two kids, would have a total income of over €33,000. Now, if you were in the regular working system, that would put you on the marginal tax rate. You'd actually have earned, as a single person, enough to be considered well off to the point where you pay 41% tax.
Gosh, that's amazing, isn't it?
It is. And as a matter of fact, if you said, OK, let's not look at minimum wage and unemployment, let's just look at a two-parent, two-child family where one of the people work, to make 33,000, you'd have to earn about 40 grand. And there's lots of people doing that. And I think that what it's doing is telling us a message that either in some way we have to get unemployment benefit down or minimum wage up, because you can't have a situation where this exists. And they say it exists for about 8% of people, but Richard Toll, who used to work at the ESRI and subsequently left, said that there was some data inconsistencies there that actually made the figure look better when the ESRI did this. And it's something that it's really contentious, because what you don't want to say to people is, oh, you're on welfare and therefore you're a scab, or you're doing this on purpose. I don't think that's the case. But you've got to have a much clearer and larger divide so that there is reward in work, greater reward, and less for not being in the productive aspect
I mean,
of the
it
economy.
really does come clear when you point that out, that if you were earning what you were earning on welfare, that you'd be in the tax brackets on wages. I mean, that's extraordinary.
You'd be on the higher rate. Well, that's as a single person. Again, as a
family of four, you probably wouldn't.
If you had one person earning, though, that is the equivalent of making 40 grand a year. 33,000. That's what you'd have to earn, because you'd have deductions for PRSI, universal social charge, and you would also have tax.
So obviously something that you would think that they're looking at within the Department of Social Welfare and whatever, the Revenue Commissioners. Adelina, you were looking at that phenomenal story, the €1 billion worth of Nazi art sitting in an apartment in Munich.
That's right. The German authorities were tipped off about 2 years ago when they found this 80-year-old man on a train to Zurich, so to German-speaking Switzerland, with 9 grand in his pocket. As you can imagine, this man who had no apparent source of income, having such a large sum of money with him on the train, it was immediately
red flagged.
Yeah, that's it. It was a warning, and he gave a wrong address to these authorities. So they went and investigated it and went into his flat and found it covered in beans, tins of beans, and behind them were artworks, 1,500 artworks.
1,500 artworks?
Yeah, from Picasso, from Matisse, from Chagall, from Renoir. So very big artists that were considered by the German Nazis as degenerate art. And apparently it was his father who'd kept them and claimed that they had been...
There's the apartment. I mean, such a nondescript... But that's interesting what you're saying there, Adelina. They were considered by the Nazis to be degenerate art.
That's right.
So this wasn't kind of pilfering for the money. This was... Why didn't they destroy them then, I wonder?
It was, you see, some of it was actually collected from Jewish families and then sold on to non-German art collectors so that they could use it to fund the Nazi campaign.
Right, people, it didn't matter if they collected degenerate art.
And then some others...
Hate-fueled genocide is okay, but let's not have any of this degenerate art floating around.
That's it. But I mean, some of it was actually burnt, so they obviously, it was just they had no fondness for any modern art. But the ones that were art collectors realised that that was a way of making money and buying paintings at a lowest, reduced rates. And then they claimed that it was bombed in 1945, all the artwork, and continued to sell it on the
here
sly.
in a flat in Munich.
That's it.
I wonder, I mean, gosh, there's going to be fascinating details. Who is this fella? What did he do during the war? He's in custody, is he? Or do we know?
The 80-year-old, we don't actually know if he is in custody. I mean, his dad is the one who collected
he only would have been about 8 during the Second World War, so he probably wasn't up to much, but he definitely kept a legacy of stuff that probably should have gone back to whoever rightfully owned it.
I mean, he sold a painting recently for just under €900,000, so he's very much aware that what he's doing is not exactly ethical.
His tax inspectors caught him, I think, actually, is what it was.
The one on the train to Europe.
Yeah, but the tax inspectors then went further, and really I'd say his big issue at this stage, because ownership might be difficult to prove in any case, is going to be a tax liability. I'd say that
For all his multi-million.
Much like Al Capone, sometimes the taxmen do a better job of catching the bad guys than the cops do.
You wonder what they're going to do with the paintings. You're right. I mean, how can you establish ownership? But listen, staying with tax, the property tax, it's really taking off as a very contentious issue, this issue of having to pay it early if you're paying by credit card or debit card.
Yeah, it is. I think that the issue is that credit, debit and cheque are the most popular methods of payment. They were well over 50% of the people who made their returns last year. And what they're doing is they're penalising people by making them pay early. Now, if you were to walk into a shop and buy something for £5 and someone said, well, if you're buying with a credit card, it's €6, you can't do that, it's illegal. But making someone pay such a large liability earlier is almost equivalent. But it's important to remember, there's also taxes that you do pay early. And I think a lot of people don't realise that. So November 15 is the cut-off for preliminary tax and final tax returns for 2012. But self-employed people have to pay their tax liability for 2013 before 2013 is out. You've got PRSI. You might never claim any of the social benefits. You could die before you retire. That's a charge on something long in advance. And the pension levy is technically a tax on retirement savings that might be 30 years away. So there are taxes in advance. The whole thing is, what they shouldn't do is take the most popular method and then turn it into this like wild theatrics.
In fairness to the revenue commissioners, you would say, listen, if you're that bothered about having to pay the property tax early, there are very many options, and they're fairly simple as well. If you want to delay it until paying next March,
it's all very simple, except for this. The liability is there, we all know that. The calculation is there, we all know that. What it boils down to is when you make the payment. What they're saying is that they can't keep these details on file, so the payment goes through the second that you hit enter. Well, why not just tell people if you're going to pay by that method,
pay in January.
We'll do this in January.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be before Christmas to where Rex Santa coming along.
Yeah, that's what I'm not clear on. I don't understand why it has to be November. Why it couldn't be the 1st of January or whatever, the 5th if it's a bank holiday. Listen, what about this? They're going to release the image today of the 14-year-old girl who was found outside the GPO.
That's right. She was found, in mid-October. She was in a very distressed condition. And, the guards have been looking for ways of identifying her. She seems to be of Eastern European origin, but they have exhausted all ways. So the only other step, I suppose, was for them to get a High Court order allowing them to release the picture. Now, they didn't release it before because presumably they had to create an incident room and they had to make sure that they had interpreters because of her origin. They had to have phone lines that were, obviously set up for this. And while all of this is going on, now the Immigrant Council of Ireland has decided that they are going to train all the Irish airline crews from 2014 to recognise victims of trafficking, especially children, so that we don't end up with a similar situation, finding, young teenagers out on the street in a state that shows that they could have been trafficked into the country and possibly for the sex trade.
OK, so we'll see that image later today, and I presume Interpol is where the real interest will be there. Listen, we're going to leave it there today, but thank you both very much indeed for coming into us this morning. Well, now it is time for the sports news, and Jackie Harley is here. Jackie.
Thanks, Keelan. Well, good morning. The FAI may have to wait